Hi everyone, my name is Carol and I work with Scleroderma Canada. I'm the Senior Manager of National Programs and Advocacy. We're here today at the University of Calgary with Bev and Dominique, who are both a part of Scleroderma Alberta. Bev runs our Calgary Make a Move Walk and Dominique runs our Edmonton Make a Move Walk. And I want to give Bev just a little bit of time to talk about her experience as a Make a Move coordinator and why she got involved and how things are going for her.
I had the opportunity to meet Dominique at the Scleroderma conference in Newfoundland, and she kind of convinced me and encouraged me to do a Make a Move walk in Calgary. So we did one in 2025. We raised $25,000 or $26,000, and then this past year we raised $53,000, which I'm absolutely blown away by. So that's money that's going to go to research and patient awareness. We're just thrilled about that. So.
We're grateful for everything you've done. I know it's a lot of work to run a walk, but we're, again, so grateful for all the work that you do.
Fabulous team, so I'm really fortunate that I had a wonderful group of people who were able to help me out.
Yeah, and I've been running the Edmonton Make a Move Walk now since 2021 with my co-coordinator, Lena. And this year we raised $15,000 yesterday, so we were happy to do that in the rain. We had to make a move, so that was interesting. Then I'm also on the board of directors for Scleroderma Canada, and I have been out at the Alberta government a few times doing advocacy because it's super important.
And we're also here today with Dr. Maggie Larche. She's also the chair of the Canadian Scleroderma Research Group. She's going to tell you a little bit more about the event that we're doing here today.
Hi, thanks very much, Carol. I'd really like to say that this is an amazing day today, World Scleroderma Day, and it focuses our minds on two main things. One is how do we make the lives of patients living with systemic sclerosis better, and two, how do we precisely target their disease in this very variable disease. And I'll introduce Simone, who's my lab manager, who'll just do a quick French translation for that.
La journée mondiale de la sclérodermie est importante, elle nous permet de nous concentrer sur deux objectifs majeurs. Comment améliorer la qualité de vie des patients et comment parvenir à une médecine de précision personnalisée quand les manifestations de cette maladie sont aussi variables.
And we'd like to say a huge thank you to Scleroderma Canada for hosting this today and to highlight the work that we're doing in our precision medicine labs with Drs. May Choi and Eugene Khrushchev and their wonderful teams of students and trainees and managers. So today we're going to walk you through what happens from engaging in research with our team, from consenting to blood work, and then we'll walk you to the lab in a few minutes. So over to you, Carol.
So Dominique and I are going to show you what the first step is, and this would be the blood draw. So this is when a patient is able to come in and donate a sample for research. This is where things start off. So we're going down this hallway here to the exam room.
My name is Catherine, and this is Rochelle, and we're both research coordinators with the Connective Tissue Disease Group.
Hello, I'm Dominique. Sure. I'm Dominique, and this is my aunt, Linda. She's here as my support person today.
So I wanted to start off by telling you a little bit about what happens before patients get invited to participate in studies. So, a long time before, we're working really hard to get the plan for the research in place, figure out all the protocols, get ethics approval, kind of work out all of the kinks. And the ethics approval is really to make sure that all of the research we do is done safely, with integrity, and ultimately to make sure that it's like the best possible research. So once we get all of that, those approvals in place, then we're able to start inviting patients such as yourself to participate. Rochelle's going to talk a little bit about consent.
Yes, so after all the approvals, like Catherine had mentioned, we're able to start recruitment. So we work with rheumatologists, clinic staff, and other researchers we collaborate with on other studies to identify eligible participants. And sometimes a patient might be eligible to participate in more than one study. So we get their informed consent, and we go over everything what's involved in the study, just to make sure the patient knows what's involved, and we will collect samples like biospecimens, like skin biopsies, muscle biopsies, urine, saliva, or even blood, like what I have here. We've just collected. Yeah.
Great. So we're going to go over to the next section. But Dominique, I wanted to ask you, what was your experience like getting diagnosed with scleroderma? If you could just share that story with us.
Yeah, so it took about 2 years since my first symptoms started with scleroderma with Raynaud's, and then a whole bunch of trying to figure out if it was rheumatic or if there was something else going on. And it took my doctor about that time, length of time to get that figured out.
So Maggie's going to take us to the lab now, but we did want to ask her a few questions while we were on the way there. So the first one that we wanted to ask was...
So I'm curious how studying blood samples actually connects to skin and internal organs.
So thanks for that. It's a great question. Thank you. Oh, so here we're just waiting for to get through the door. So how does blood work? Give us information about skin and internal organs? It's a great question because you could argue that it doesn't. But what we know is that we can measure lots of proteins in your blood. We can measure antibodies, and that's what Dr. May Choi's lab do. And that gives us ideas of what proteins are involved in the fibrosis of scleroderma. The antibodies give us an idea of what type of scleroderma you might have, and as we know, this is a really variable disease. In some patients, it affects the patient very deeply, with many organs involved. In other patients, they just have skin manifestations, which can be troublesome enough. But so from the proteins and antibodies, we can tell a lot about the type of disease that you have. And then my lab and Dr. Khrushchev's lab look at cellular immunology, how the cells interact with each other and talk to each other and tell us whether fibrosis is going to happen, what's going on with the blood vessels. We can tell all of that from some of the cellular immunology that we're doing. And then in addition to that, I'm collecting skin samples from patients, along with Dr. Khrushchev's also collecting muscle samples for his myositis biobank. So between us, we're all working together with similar protocols to gather all these patients with scleroderma or scleromyositis in Calgary. So,
and I was also just wondering, how important do you think partnerships between researchers, clinicians, patients, and organizations like Scleroderma Canada are for the advancement of research?
So without Scleroderma Canada's support, none of this would be possible. In particular with Canadian Scleroderma Research Group, we have been supported for many years from Scleroderma Canada and Scleroderma Ontario, and now the provincial partners. And without that very important sponsorship, we wouldn't have Dr. May Choi's biobank, which is the National Canadian Scleroderma Research Group biobank. And so she's been able to be funded partially to support that work. And we have over 30,000 samples in the freezer. And I think we'll show you that in a second. So partnerships with Scleroderma Canada and the provincial chapters has been so important for all of this work, and including collaborations with our other partners. So for example, Dr. Brett Toombs in Montreal, who runs the Scleroderma Patient Intervention Network, we collaborate vigorously with him, and then other basic science collaborators like Dr. Mo Osman in Edmonton. So these collaborations are wonderful. So shall I show you into the lab?
Yes, please.
So come on in. And we're going to introduce Dr. Eugene Khrushchev and Dr. May Choi.
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Eugene Khrushchev. I'm a rheumatologist and a clinician scientist here at the University of Calgary. Bonjour tout le monde, je suis Eugene Khrushchev, je suis un chercheur et un rhumatologue ici à l'Université de Calgary.
And Dr. Choi, here's the samples that maybe you would like to deal with.
Oh, that's
Thank you.
great. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. May Choi. I'm a rheumatologist who sees patients with scleroderma, and I'm also a researcher. So welcome to our combined lab, the Connective Tissue Diseases Research Group, which consists of the Kristev lab, the Choi lab, and the Dr. Maggie Larche lab. And so today we're going to give you a tour of all three labs, starting with my lab. And I have the blood samples right here. So just to start off, and Simon is going to help translate this part in French a little bit, petit peu. So what we're going to do is, so my lab specializes in a blood test called antibodies. And so we're going to take you through all the steps to get those tested. And I'm going to have Dominique join us because she's going to help us with this journey process. And so with that, Simon, could you just translate kind of the overall plan?
Overall, bien sûr, mais avec plaisir. Bienvenue dans le groupe de recherche sur les maladies du tissu conjonctif. Aujourd'hui, nous allons vous montrer ce que nous faisons avec les échantillons sanguins de patients après prélèvement. Dans le laboratoire de recherche de May Choi, nous utilisons des analyses sanguines pour rechercher des auto-anticorps.
Merci beaucoup. Okay. So, Dominique?
Yes, I'm excited to see where this is going.
Perfect. So, we're going to take this blood sample to our very first station.
Okay, show me the way.
Okay, so this is where the blood sample first goes to when it arrives in the lab. So I'm going to let my lab manager, Jean, take over.
So once the samples come to the lab, they come the same day that they're drawn, and we centrifuge them in order to separate the serum, which is what we use to run our tests, from the rest of the blood components. So the centrifuge spins the samples at 1,000 Gs for 10 minutes, and what this does is it separates the sample based on density. So the heavier components will go to the bottom, and the lighter component, which is the serum, goes to the top. And we spun a tube earlier, and so this is what a spun blood sample will look like. So you can see the red cell components are at the bottom, and the serum, which is what we'll be running our tests on, is at the top. So because it's nicely separated, we can take the serum out and put them into fresh tubes for either storage or for running more tests. So we'll take you guys to the freezer now, and you can see what the -80 freezers look like. Okay. Oh, go ahead. Okay. Okay, so this is one of our -80 freezers, and it is at -80, well, slightly lower, -80 degrees Celsius, so it's much colder than your average freezer that's in your kitchen. Those are about -20. And the freezer has about 30,000 samples in it, and that represents over 6,000 patients. And -80 is so cold you can't actually hold it for too long, or else you'll end up with burns, cold burns.
Perfect. Thanks, Jean. So all of the CSRG samples are stored in this freezer. That's over 20 years of samples stored in that freezer. And what I'm going to show you here is our new freezer that's sponsored by Scleroderma Canada that is going to store the next generation of blood samples, hopefully for the next 20 years or even more. And so that's why we have the logo here for Scleroderma Canada and then the CSRG logo, because this is where all the research samples will go. So I'll pass it back to you, Dominique.
Thanks, Dr. Choi. I'm looking forward to seeing also what other tests come out of our blood when it's sent down here.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when a patient sends a blood sample to a diagnostic lab at their hospital, or they send it to her research, I'm going to show you some of the machines that are used to run these blood tests. So one of the very first steps in diagnosing scleroderma is a blood test called the anti-nuclear antibody test. So we're going to show you what that test, how it's run and which machine that we use. So come on over. All right. So this is Jordan and this is Yang. They're gonna show you the anti-nuclear antibody blood test machine. Pass it on to the experts.
Thank you. Hello, as Dr. Choi said, my name is Jordan. I'm one of her master's students, and this is the ANA, or anti-nuclear antibody station. And an ANA is a test that doctors will order as a first screening step in trying to understand whether someone might have an autoimmune condition. So in autoimmune conditions like scleroderma, the body produces antibodies, which are detected by an ANA. And traditionally, this is done using blood samples, but our lab also investigates saliva and dried blood spots as non-invasive alternatives. So to perform an ANA, 1 drop of the patient's sample is placed onto a special slide right there. And then if the antibodies are present, they will bind the slide, and then they are detected and visualized using a green fluorescent dye.
Thank you, Jordan. And my name is Yang. I'm a member of Dr. Choi's research team, and this is the NovaView automated imaging system that we use to take a picture of the cells on those ANA slides. And it is generously funded by Calgary Health Foundation. And here is how the ANA results look like. When autoantibodies are present, the cells will show bright green fluorescent signals indicating a positive results. And when we look at those pictures, there are main things we focus. 2 things we focus. One is the pattern, the other is the titer. So the pattern describes how the antibodies appear to bind to the cells under the microscope. And antibodies can produce different staining patterns, including cytoplasmic pattern, nuclear, or mitotic patterns. And different patterns can be associated with different autoimmune diseases. For example, for scleroderma, it's often associated with AC3 centromere pattern or AC8 or 9, the nucleolar patterns. And the second is about the titer. So the titer can tell us how much antibodies are there in the sample. So we can think of this way. The green glow is a clue. Brighter green means more antibodies in the sample. If the green color is still there, even we dilute the samples many times, the titer is higher. In general, the higher titer means a higher concentration of antibodies. And this information helps health provider to assess the significance of the results and then determine whether further testing are needed.
Thank you. So as you can see, we have the machines to run this test, and it is a very important first step in the diagnosis of scleroderma. So now that you've seen this, I'm going to pass the mic back on to Dominique here to continue our journey.
And Dominique, while we're walking over there, do you think I could just ask you what it means to you to know that the blood that you give is impacting research for future patients?
Yeah, so it's really neat to be down here and to see the blood bank and to know that that's something that's going to be used year after year after year for who knows how long. And that the blood sample that even I gave quite a few years ago can be used in order for them to fine-tune treatments for scleroderma or different ways for our doctors to be able to assess us and be able to use that information. So I'm really thankful for that.
And we are very appreciative of all the patients who participate in our studies and make them possible, so thank you. So the next station that we're going to take, Dominique and the rest of the team, is the more specific scleroderma autoantibody test. So after the ANA is done, often the next step is to do more specific scleroderma antibodies. So you may have heard of antibodies like anti-SCL70 or topoisomerase or anti-centromere antibodies. So those antibodies are more specific to scleroderma, and let me show you the machine that is used to run that. So I'm going to pass the mic on to my student Ray and my lab technician Hyan.
Thanks, Dr. Choi. So this is the machine that we use to run line blots. It's really nice because all we have to do is prepare the reagents at a tiny bit of sample, and then 2 hours later we get a result like this. So you can see all the strips have all these little pads encoded in a number of Scleroderma specific antigens. And when a patient's serum has that specific autoantibody, you'll see a dark band appear, just like this. And then when you scan it, you get a sheet like this with all the relative band intensities, which puts together a Scleroderma panel showing which autoantibodies are present and in what relative intensity. So this test was approved back in 2005 by Health Canada, and our lab was actually one of the first, the first, to use it for Scleroderma research in Canada.
Yeah, so thank you, Ray. The additional information is the benefit of this machine is we usually using the tiny serum samples, and you can get like last 2 hours, you can get multiple antibodies tests and the result, and then it's really good for the stat test and also for the good for the diagnosis. In this point, we have to send a big thanks for Mitogen Lab because Dr. Frizzler gave a huge support, and back to 2005 when we are starting, he donates like all the reagents and then the technicians at the time. We've been done so far 1,500 samples for baseline sample, ANA and Scleroderma is all done here. Right now, Dr. Choice will take a look after this and will continue to support the CSRG studies as well. Thank you.
Perfect. So yeah, you just met Haiyan. Haiyan actually ran all of those tests on those Scleroderma samples. So going back to, not to date things, but Haiyan was the very original person who did all of the tests back 20 years ago. So she's clearly an expert in this test. And in that list of tests, there's not just the SCL70 and the centromere, but there are more specific blood tests in there that can tell you potential complications that the patient might have during their disease course. For example, could they get kidney involvement or lung involvement? Those antibodies can be a way for a physician to predict somebody's risk of going on to get other types of organ involvement as part of their disease. So very helpful for prognosis. Okay, so I'm going to pass the mic back to Dominique. So we're going to move on to the next part of the lab.
Oh, this way, right?
Yeah.
That way. All right. And are we going to see some more tests that are being run in this area?
Yeah, so we're going to head back because sometimes our patients don't have the typical autoantibodies. They're negative on all the tests that we've run, but they clearly, when we examine them, they have systemic sclerosis. So what do we do in that situation? Well, in our research lab, we can look for these novel biomarkers, so things that we haven't discovered yet, and then hopefully those become more standard blood tests in the clinic for physicians to use. So how do we do that? I'm going to take you to the next station here, where we have one of these highly specialized machines that can help us look for these novel blood markers. Nathan?
Hi there, everyone. I'm Nathan. I'm one of the students in the lab here, and this is our Luminex machine, which was generously funded by the Canada Foundation for Innovation. And what's interesting about this machine is it can actually measure up to 500 biomarkers, whether that be proteins or autoantibodies, in a single sample, which almost allows us to generate a fingerprint of each patient's immune system. This information can be very helpful for rheumatologists like Dr. Choi when deciding which treatments and therapies to prescribe to their patients. In addition to that, as Dr. Choi has mentioned, a lot of our research focuses on discovering new or novel proteins or antibodies in patients with diseases like Scleroderma, and this is one of the machines that we use to do that. So it's a very important machine as part of our research program.
Thank you so much. And then the second machine that we have here that also does specialized autoantibody tests is the mesoscale. And I have Sajida here, my PhD student, who will go on to explain what that is.
So hi everyone, my name is Sajida. I'm one of Dr. Choi's PhD students, and one of the assays that I routinely run is the mesoscale discovery, or MSD assay. So this looks at several proteins at once using a very small amount of patient sample. Think about a fraction of a drop. This is very useful to us as patient samples are highly precious, so we want to get as much information as we can while using as little sample as possible. The assay itself uses one of these plates over here, a 96-well plate. Each well gets the blood sample, whether it be plasma or serum, and then we hook it up to this machine over here, which has different detectors to look at up to 10 different antibodies that we could detect within the patient sample. So what's also interesting about this assay itself is that we aren't limited to just commercial assays. So if we find an antibody, such as on the Luminex machine that we are have interest in, we can make our own assays or our own plates with the manufacturer to detect up to 10 different antibodies. Detecting multiple different proteins or antibodies within a single sample is what is called multiplexing, which helps save time, reduce costs, and help us give a more clear picture of the immune system in diseases such as scleroderma. Also, producing different assays or different our own specific plates for our research helps us look at molecules that may not be standard clinical tests just yet and help us answer new questions as our understanding of scleroderma evolves.
Thank you so much, Sajida. So this concludes the first part of the lab tour. So just to quickly summarize, we've showed you some machines that help us process the samples once we receive it into the lab. And we also showed you where those samples are stored in a very, very cold freezer. And then when we're ready for testing, because we have a specific research question, then we take it through all the different stations in the lab to look for established biomarkers and also for new ones that we haven't discovered yet. And our end goal is to bring those blood tests into the clinic for physicians to use as soon as possible. And so with that, Dominique, I'm going to now take you to the next part of the lab, which is Dr. Kristev's lab, who will study the muscle, because sometimes the muscle is also involved in scleroderma. Perfect.
And Dominique, I wanted to ask you, if you encountered a patient who's maybe thinking about getting involved in research, what would you say to that person?
I would say absolutely. I think it's really important that as patients we have this is an opportunity for us to help out for the future of scleroderma or any autoimmune disease. And if doctors are offering research, then I would say sign up. Yeah, it might poke and it might hurt for a little bit, but I think it's really important when we see all the work that's being done for the future for new scleroderma patients and old.
Thank you so much. So we're going to head over here, and I'll hand you off to Dr. Eugene here.
Hi, everyone. Great to see you again.
Hello again. I'm Simon. I'm also a research associate for Dr. Eugene Kristev. Je suis Simon. Bonjour. Je suis aussi un associé de recherche pour le Dr. Eugene Kristev.
And I'm Dr. Eugene Kristev, Dr. Eugene Kristev.
Donc, nous allons parler aujourd'hui de la myosite, une maladie méconnue, mais qui est fréquemment associée à la sclérodermie. So we're going to talk to you about myositis, a condition that is not well known, but frequently overlaps with myositis. Alors, Eugene, commençons simplement. C'est quoi la myosite? So, Eugene, what is myositis?
At its simplest form, myositis is inflammation of the muscles. The immune system, which is meant to protect us, accidentally attacks the muscles, and this causes muscle inflammation. Au sens le plus simple, la myosite désigne une inflammation des muscles. Elle fait partie d'une famille qui est nommée les inflammatoires myopathies. Le système immunitaire, qui est censé de nous protéger, s'attaque par erreur aux propres muscles d'une personne.
So, how does myositis present?
The most common presentation for myositis is weakness. So people will start noticing difficulty climbing stairs, getting out of a chair, washing their hair, or lifting their hands above their head. However, it's rarely limited to just the muscles. Patients with myositis can have skin disease, lung disease, swallowing difficulty, and even heart disease. The lines blur even further because patients with scleroderma can also develop myositis. It really shows that these connective tissue diseases don't have clear-cut lines, and there is frequent overlap between our connective tissue diseases.
So is there a name when myositis and scleroderma overlap?
Yes, the name for when myositis and scleroderma overlap is called scleromyositis. It is actually the most common and one of the most important overlap syndromes for both myositis and scleroderma patients.
So what does that actually look like in a patient?
So it can be a mix. Some patients will have classical scleroderma with skin thickening and Raynaud's, and then either early or later in their disease course, they will develop inflammatory muscle disease. On the other hand, some patients can present with frank inflammatory muscle disease, but they might have more subtle features of scleroderma, like puffy hands or Raynaud's.
And is there a way to identify scleromyositis using lab tests?
So some patients will have what we call overlap antibodies or scleromyositis antibodies. However, a lot of the time it really comes down to the history and physical examination, looking for signs of both scleroderma and myositis in these patients.
Okay. And so why is it so important to recognize it early?
It's important to recognize scleromyositis early because some patients might fall through the cracks. A patient might be followed for their scleroderma, but they might have subtle myositis that goes unnoticed, and vice versa.
Okay. And what kind of research do we perform in our lab?
Most of the research that we do here runs through the Canadian Inflammatory Myopathy Study, which includes patients who have scleromyositis. Patients are consented, and they give either blood and then sometimes skin and muscle tissue. What we do here is we look at different protein panels and other ways to image their biopsies to look at thousands of different proteins and how they change across diseases, hoping to find better biomarkers or clinical lab tools that we can use to improve the diagnosis of these patients. Additionally, what we hope to do with some of this work is to identify new disease mechanisms or why the disease develops in these patients, which might help us develop new therapies in the future or repurpose old therapies.
Okay, Eugene, you mentioned that some of these patients get lung disease. Where do the lungs fit in?
So lung involvement is a very important manifestation for both scleroderma, myositis, and scleromyositis patients. Because lung involvement can result in trouble breathing, we have a particular interest in our lab of finding better biomarkers to assess who will develop lung involvement as well as who will develop severe lung involvement that might need earlier and more aggressive treatments.
So for someone watching who lives with scleroderma, what should they take away?
So if you have scleroderma and you start noticing difficulty getting out of a chair, washing your hair, or doing different functions with your muscles, this is something that you should talk to your providers about, specifically your rheumatologist, as this might be a sign that you are developing some subtle inflammatory muscle disease.
What else?
And the second part is that research like this depends on patients. Whether you take part in a study or simply share your experience with researchers like us, you help build the knowledge that leads to better tests and better treatments for the next person.
Okay. Merci d'avoir pris le temps de visiter notre laboratoire et de nous écouter sur la scléromyosite. Thank you. Thank you, Scleroderma Canada. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Scleroderma Canada, for coming and taking the time to visit our side of the lab. We're going to quickly pass by a couple of our students here who are currently working on some experiments looking at how the blood from patients with myositis interacts with different bacteria, hoping to find how bacteria might result in a development of disease. Now we're going to head over to Dr. Larche's part of the lab where she's going to teach you a little bit about what she does over here.
Hi.
Dr. Larche.
Thanks very much for coming full circle back to the Larche part of the lab. We're going to first say that I've mentioned cutting-edge basic science research that we're doing here in all three labs, and it's very exciting to see a journey of a patient from pre-scleroderma, early scleroderma, established scleroderma, and then what it can do to the internal organs, as Dr. Eugene Khrushchev mentioned earlier. So our research is really focusing on cellular biology from both the blood and the skin tissues. And I mentioned earlier that Dr. Khrushchev's looking at muscle biopsy samples, and he was telling you a bit about that. So I'm just going to quickly show you with Anne here. Before I do that, Simon's going to just translate that little bit for us.
No, I wasn't ready for that part. I'm sorry.
Okay. So So, Anne, over to you.
Hi, I'm Anne. I'm one of the researchers with Dr. Larche's Autoimmune Precision Lab. Actually, many of the rheumatologists at the academic clinic here in Calgary are involved in research to help find better treatments for people living with myositis and scleroderma. As you've heard in one of the previous segments, participation in one of these studies often starts with an appointment with a rheumatologist. Then if you're interested and eligible, you'd be invited to speak to a researcher like myself, who would give you more information about the study and allow you to ask questions. Then participation could look like giving a skin biopsy, which is just a small sample of skin taken under local anesthetic. And these samples can actually give us a window into how scleroderma affects collagen, blood vessels, and immune cells. And with enough samples, we might be able to understand the biologic process that causes the disease to develop and why it behaves differently person to person. Now what we'd like to show you is another test we use in the Autoimmune Precision Lab, which is capillaroscopy. Dr. Larche?
Yeah. So thank you. This is a tool where we use this device here to magnify the blood vessels at the very end of your fingers, at the cuticle here. And this is a typical example of a patient with systemic sclerosis. Now, we can see patients with really early disease, active disease, and late disease, and they all have different patterns. This is a typical active scleroderma pattern. You can see here these tiny blood vessels are what's really nearly normal, but then you can see they swell dramatically, and then some of them burst, causing these black areas of hemorrhage into the cuticle here. So these are your nail-fold capillaries, and that's what I'm looking at in the clinic, and that's part of the research that we're doing, because what we know about scleroderma is it's a combination of a fibrosis, but probably triggered by the immune system being a bit dysregulated, followed by a vasculopathy, i.e. an abnormal blood vessels. So I mentioned the cutting-edge basic science. And Simon's going to translate this little bit for us now, where we take your blood and skin samples and to see how the immune system is different in patients with very early established and later systemic sclerosis compared to healthy controls. And in alignment with Dr. Choi's work, where she's looking at proteins, we are expanding to look on at the cellular processes that go on.
Donc vous avez eu un aperçu du travail de recherche de pointe sur des échantillons sanguins ou sur d'autres tissus, comme la peau, pour identifier les différences du système immunitaire chez les patients atteints de scléodermie à différentes étapes de la maladie. Notre objectif est d'examiner comment les cellules de votre sang et de votre peau s'activent différemment. Et ce travail est complémentaire avec celui proposé dans le laboratoire du Dr. May Choi, qui est plus axé sur la nature des protéines ou des anticorps présents dans le sang.
Oh, merci. Let me take you into the lab. So you first. First, we're going to introduce Yvonne. You want to introduce yourself? Hold the microphone.
Oh, thank you.
There we go.
Hi, my name is Yvonne Henshaw, and I am the research coordinator for the Scleroderma Research Group. And I'm excited to share some of the amazing projects that we've been working on. Our projects actually focus on improving knowledge and care for people living with systemic sclerosis, localized scleroderma, and other connective tissue diseases. And some of the studies we are currently working on include aging with systemic sclerosis, spatial transcriptomics, and proteomics in connective tissue diseases, and research supported through inflammatory vascular disease, immune dysfunction, patient registry, and biobank. And through this project, our goal is to understand how these diseases develop, how they affect the patient over time, and how research can contribute to improved care and outcomes. Thank you. So I'll be moving it to Sini here to show us how the process is going on in our lab.
Thank you, Yvonne. Hi, I'm Sini John, a research manager for the Scleroderma Research Group. So here I'm processing the skin biopsy samples. So we are doing the skin biopsy samples to better understand the disease scleroderma in the molecular level. So we are using a technique called spatial transcriptomics. So spatial transcriptomics help us to understand the types of the gene expressed and how they are active across the skin, and how do they interact between the cells in the skin tissue. As you all know, scleroderma is not just acting on the skin cells alone. It also interacts with other cells like fibroblasts, immune cells, to cause vascular damage and also inflammation. So the skin samples which we collect are later, can you hold? So we'll keep them in the liquid nitrogen. So the cells, I'll show you, liquid nitrogen is nitrogen in the liquid form, which is like the temperature is the temperature is minus 196 degrees Celsius. So it's very cold. So we will keep the skin biopsies in the liquid nitrogen. I'll just show you how the liquid nitrogen looks like. So we'll keep the samples in the tubes here. So it's pretty interesting to see. Yeah. So
I love all that smoke.
So the cells could be preserved for years, and it could be used for our future experiments. So now I'll hand over to our Sophia.
Who's first? You.
Hi, my name is Maria. And my name is Sophie, and we're trainees under Dr. Lalche. Welcome to the lab. This is the biosafety cabinet where the blood goes after the clinic, where Sophie and I process the blood. The purpose of processing the blood is to essentially isolate a specific type of immune cell and study its function. So here we already have a blood sample that we're working on. The top layer is the layer that contains the cells that we want to isolate. After we do that, it goes into the freezer where we store them for future experiments.
And this gives us a snapshot into how the immune system of the patient is working. So alongside Dr. Choi's lab, we extend into looking at how the immune cells work. So this allows us to better understand the disease. It allows us to help with treatment and develop drugs, and all working towards an end goal of personalised treatments for the patients.
Thank you, Maria and Sophie. That's great. So where now, Carol?
So we're going to go over here. But I'd also like to ask Dominique, how has research already impacted your care or treatment options?
So before I say that, I'm so amazed at the lab and knowing, like, being a patient and knowing I give blood regularly, or knowing that I've had to give this sample exactly, and being in here and being able to see all the steps that are behind the scenes. Sometimes I often wonder, where is it going? What does happen? And knowing that there's research happening is it's incredible. So thank you. I know that was off script, but being a part of research for myself has benefited me with teaming up with Dr. Osman a few times, and then being a patient partner. Also, with reading research from other universities and other studies that are done, and going back to my doctor and saying, hey, have we tried this? Can we try this? Is this going to help me? And having those conversations is really important. So I encourage patients to reach out to their rheumatologists, to reach out and find out how you can be involved in studies. I think it's really important.
Thank you for sharing. So we're going to head over to this side here now. And I do have a few questions here for you. My question would be, if you could share one message with patients about why research matters, what would it be?
So the research we do here would not be possible without you guys, the patients. These are rare diseases, and therefore getting your blood samples and your clinical data is extremely important for us developing new tests for how to diagnose disease, as well as potentially new therapeutic targets. So thank you for participating in research if you do.
And Maggie, how does laboratory research eventually translate into better care for patients?
That's a really important question, and part of the reason we're here on World Scleroderma Day, to try to get to the bottom of how basic science research does help So, for example, a good example is Dr. Roy's work with Dr. Mar Fritzler, which has shown that specific antibodies can give you an idea of what exact type, i.e. precision medicine of scleroderma you have. And Dr. Eugene Khrushchev's work looking at the spatial transcriptomics in muscle biopsies, for example, can really help hone down this precision medicine that we're really attracted to in our care of patients.
Dr. Choi, if we were having this conversation again 5 years from now, what breakthrough or advancements would you hope that we would be celebrating?
Thanks for that question. So I think all of our dreams, our ultimate vision is to find the cure for scleroderma. And I believe that when we work together, we're going to get closer and closer to that answer in 5 years. And one of the other things that we want to be able to achieve is actually prevent it from ever even becoming a disease. So finding better biomarkers, understanding why it happens will help us get to that answer as well.
And can I just interject
Yeah,
there?
absolutely.
I think that's part of the reason we're really excited to look at even pre-scleroderma and then very early scleroderma when you've just got the Raynaud's and puffy hand stage. Sorry, I interrupted. Did you?
No, that's perfect.
Yeah, yeah. So we're really wanting to get to the crux of why the immune system goes wrong early on in the disease. And if we can target that, then we might get a chance of this cure in Dr. Choi's cure in 5 years' time.
Everybody's work.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll take you to that.
Yep. So, you want to?
Oh, go ahead.
So we'd really be remiss if we didn't thank our generous patients, and thank you to the patients for joining in and participating. It really makes a huge difference to our scientific endeavours. Also to our sponsors and our donors. So we've listed a few here. I'm the director of the Canadian Scleroderma Research Group, and Dr. May Choi is the head of the biobank, as we've discussed. And together we form, with Dr. Khrushchev, we form the Connective Tissue Diseases Research Group. May Choi's in charge of the Mitogen DX research lab. And we'd like to thank each of our provincial partners: Scleroderma Saskatoon, Scleroderma Association of BC, Scleroderma Ontario, Scleroderma Atlantic, Scleroderma Canada, and of course the McCaig Institute, where we all work, and the Snyder Institute is the Immunology Institute of University of Calgary, and we wouldn't be here without Scleroderma Canada. So a huge thank you to you for hosting this live Facebook event.
We just want to say thank you to our patient participants for being here today and everyone who's watching the live. If you're interested in knowing more information about resources that we, Scleroderma Canada, provide to patients, you can find us at www.scleroderma.ca or at Scleroderma Can on Instagram and Scleroderma Canada on Facebook. And I believe you can find the CSRG at...
So the CSRG QR code is right here. And just one quick announcement, it's literally hot off the press that the CSRG, or Canadian Scleroderma Research Group, has been awarded a government grant to support our work, having been supported for many years from Scleroderma Canada, but ongoing work, a grant of over $200,000 from the government, which we heard about on Saturday. I was super excited. So thank you very much.
And thank you to everyone who participated in this live today. If everyone just wants to give a big wave. Thank you for being here today, and thank you everybody for watching, and we hope to see you next year.
Thank you.